Bill Gates is officially backing climate scientists who are lobbying for large-scale geoengineering projects to combat global warming, whether you believe that CO2 has anything to do with global warming or not.
My name is Scott Stevens. I was a television weatherman for 20 years. These chemtrails are absolutely required to impact whatever weather event they were designing. And the trails were an absolute necessary ingredient for them to achieve their weather modification goals. So we're finding the aerosols, the metal particulates, the weather engineering, whether it's scalar, ionic, or orgone, or the chi of the atmosphere. All of those can be used and leveraged to create weather events that are several standard deviations or outside what would be typically normal. Before jumping on the chemtrail bandwagon I needed a motive. Without a motive, you can't say what they're doing and why they're doing it. You have to have a motive. So the agenda was drought. The agenda was to kill the storm, at least in that one particular spot. You can kill a storm in place. That's easy to do with HAARP. You just change the polarization, you change the ionization of the atmosphere, and the storm will fall apart. And so it's very easy to add those particulates of aluminum, barium, and whatever else they want to put in there. And as you add heat to that, those particulates then radiate the heat into the atmosphere and it warms. Let's just say the storms can develop more violently, more quickly, in places that are not necessarily as where you would expect them to be. And we've got technologies available to us now that can do, continent-sized projects. Is all of the persistent trails behind it. So that tells me, Michael, that they are engineering this storm to a great degree. Now all of this stuff is chemtrail debris or chemtrail clouds that had been laid down over Utah and over southern Colorado earlier in the day. And if you control the weather, you're going to control the planet. It's that simple. The work we're doing will provide cover for others to come out. And I'm most interested in whistleblowers.
Hi, the subject of chemtrails keeps coming up, or at least it came up while I was beginning my research on weather modification. I wasn't even a believer that they actually existed, that there was a trail separate from the regular condensation trail, and those trails being the chemtrails. And then we would have days like this. We end up with a milky white sky with persistent trails. And this didn't happen just once in a while, but would happen fairly frequently. These days would occur most often before a storm would come in from the west. And in classical meteorology, that's okay, because that's where the moisture arrives first, at the higher levels, at those beginning levels of cirrus. And so you'd expect, if you've got jet trail up there seeding the sky, you're going to get contrails of some duration. What set these days apart was that the balloons, the radiosondes that go up, would come back reporting humidities 20%, 25%, 30%, way too low to account for the persistentness, the long duration of these contrails. So that led some people to believe that there was something else up there when we're talking about chemtrails. The man who whose work I first came across, his name was Clifford Carnicom, and he was down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Again, the desert Southwest, you've got dry skies for, 9 months of the year. Again, with interludes as storms would move through there in the winter and also during the summer monsoon season. But even in Idaho, where I first became aware of the chemtrail phenomena, the skies were generally good for 100 miles visibility. On days like this, as you can see, we could probably count a half a dozen trails where the plane has been there and has left a trail which has resulted in the sky becoming cloudy. And I promise you, if we go look at the Denver radiosonde or the Cheyenne one just up the road here, we'll find that the humidity is less than 40%. So these trails should have persisted for less than 1 minute and likely less than 10 seconds.
Here's our discontinuities. That break right there, and along this trail, we see other breaks. Here, where the trail rolls over, got a wavelength, and then another break there. So this spot From there to there denotes a wavelength.
For me to come in and get on board the chemtrail phenomena, that conspiracy that I was honestly a little uncomfortable in jumping aboard, I needed a motive. I needed to know why these planes were up in the sky. There was talk and lab reports that there were biologicals, that we were looking at heavy metals, that there was this whole chemical concoction that these planes were spraying, and that is a very different mixture than water. I don't mind breathing water vapor. This stuff might be a different story. And when we begin to see the opacity of the sky changing so profoundly, I needed to know why. So I did something, took a little money. I took some webcams. I bought some Logitech Orbit webcams, little $99 things, hooked them up to a little computer and pointed them at the sky and let them grab a picture every 5 seconds, and then at the end of the day would render a movie. And it took 4 months before I began to figure out what the planes were doing up there. If we look off to the southern sky, you can see a group of those trails all together. And my discovery was that these planes were up there outlining the sky so that the weather makers can apply their electromagnetic solution, their HAARP solutions, their solutions to change the weather. If you can add a particulate to the sky, you can apply heat to it. That heat is going to radiate or decay into the atmosphere. And if Lieutenant Colonel Bearden is right, and these beams are bidirectional, meaning you can drop energy into a zone or you could pull energy out of the zone, then I would find these trails in and around all significant weather events. We would find them around hurricanes. We would find them around tornado outbreaks. We would find them around snowstorms. We would find them over top of heat waves. So within any of the weather that is manipulated or modified by these weather makers, we would find trails. And as I continue to look into this chemtrail phenomena, many nations were observing, seeing these chemtrails overhead. Up here, just below the sun, we've got a patch of cloud that continues to brighten up. That area of cloudiness is growing. It has been outlined by chemtrails. So these chemtrails are acting as a targeting, an alignment mechanism. So from space, you can deposit energy at very specific layers in the atmosphere. The other thing they can do is that the trails act like a water or a drop of dye in moving water. Much like if you go into your doctor's office for an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, they flush your system, your circulatory system, with barium so they can see how it works. It gives them a way to look inside your body. Barium is barium and aluminum are some of the primary components that we're seeing with these trails in the skies and these chemtrails. Again, this happens before and during major weather events. My chemtrail photography has kind of evolved over the years. I started with this $99 Logitech webcam. When I was seeing the chemtrails flying, the detail, the texture in the clouds just was not being picked up by these cameras. So I ended up going with a high definition Panasonic, and this is just a beautiful, beautiful camera. Lets me lock it in at infinity and pick up some of that beautiful texture that when you see these electromagnetic tools beginning to stimulate the atmosphere, whatever way they want to do, I was finally beginning to pick that up visually so I could share it with you. Something that surveillance of the sky has afforded me over these past 4 years is the ability to pick out which planes are commercial and which ones are not. For a long time, and there's still even this misconception on the web that the short trails planes are regular commercial craft. This is not so. We see the long-lasting trails, the marking chemtrails, as I have called them, because they are simply out there marking the sky. They leave this thin wire, this thin metallic wire, and then it deforms. It changes shape as it moves through the atmosphere, is caught up in the atmosphere. They don't always, however, move with the clouds. I have seen on numerous occasions clouds, actually the chemtrails, moving through the clouds coherently. And this would not happen with the regular condensation trail. Another way of discerning which are chemtrails and contrails are the atmosphere, the meteorological targets that these planes fly through. You will see a deformed area in the trail off in the distance. We have the flat trail, it rolls, it dips and then rolls. These shorter trail planes will come along and mark precisely, with incredible precision, right where that trail breaks. Again, measuring where we have a discontinuity in the flow of the atmosphere. That's important. You won't get a United, an American, Southwest plane interested in the trails out ahead of them. These are chemtrail flights, and there are many, probably half of these weather modification flights leave no trail at all, making them very, very difficult, other than where they fly through the sky, to discern if they're commercial or a chemtrail flight.